Okay, let's dive into this. We're looking at a tech deal that, on the surface, just looks like a big investment. But it's actually the final move in a massive geopolitical chess game. It's a story all about AI, global power, and one company that got caught right in the middle of it all. And it all kicks off with this number, $1.5 billion. That is how much Microsoft just poured into a single AI company based in the United Arab Emirates. Now, you look at that and you think, wow, that's a huge vote of confidence. But believe me, the real story here is so much more complicated. Because this deal, it wasn't really about business. Not at its core. It was the end game in a really high-stakes, behind-the-scenes showdown between the US and China over who gets to control the future of technology in the Middle East. So you're probably wondering, who is this company at the center of the storm? Let's meet G42. They were founded back in 2018 in Abu Dhabi, and their name, well, it's a cool little nod to The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where 42 is the answer to everything. And you've got to hear their public vision. It is big. The CEO, Peng Xiao, he talks about G42 not just as a company, but as this force for all of humanity, kicking off a new golden age of intelligence. It's a really inspiring, super ambitious message. And this is where you start to see the company's really unique, and let's be honest, powerful structure. On one side, you have Peng Xiao, the US-educated tech guy, the visionary, who actually renounced his American citizenship. And on the other side, the chairman, Sheikh Tahnoon bin Zayed. Now, he's not just royalty. He is the UAE's national security advisor. We're talking one of the most powerful intelligence figures in the entire Middle East. So you've got this blend of commercial tech ambition and deep state power. And that combination is exactly why, behind the scenes, Washington was starting to get really, really alarmed. You can bet the CIA and other US spy agencies started digging deep into G42's business. And what did they find? Well, they found a pattern. For years, American intelligence had been tracking G42's growing connections to major Chinese tech firms, companies like Huawei, which the US sees as a massive national security threat. We're talking about everything from surveillance tech and social media apps to really sensitive genetics projects. The ties were extensive. So what was the specific fear here? What was the big deal that got Washington so concerned about one company's business partners? Well, it basically boiled down to three huge national security risks. First, espionage. The worry was that all the Huawei hardware baked into G42's systems could be a kind of Trojan horse for Chinese spies. Second, data security. The fear that super-sensitive info, like the genetic data of millions of people, could end up in Beijing's hands. And third, military-civil fusion. This idea that cutting-edge American tech could be passed through G42 to Chinese companies that are legally required to help their military. And these weren't just some abstract fears being whispered about in intelligence agencies. This quiet pressure campaign pretty quickly blew up into a direct confrontation between the US and one of its close allies, the UAE. The message from the White House, delivered face-to-face by top officials like Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo, was incredibly blunt. It was, you have to make a choice. The UAE and G42 had to pick a side. The days of trying to play both sides in the tech world, they were over. And then, in 2022, things got even more intense. US spy agencies reportedly uncovered intelligence that just took this whole situation to another level. This wasn't about potential risks anymore. This was about damage that had allegedly already been done. The allegation was absolutely explosive, that G42 had transferred tech to Huawei that was then used to upgrade China's most advanced air-to-air missiles. This wasn't some future threat. This was a direct challenge to American military superiority right now. Now, it's important to say, G42 has strongly denied these claims, calling them false and defamatory. But in Washington, the alarm bells were deafening. So, faced with this incredible pressure, the very real threat of sanctions, and the stark choice that Washington laid out, G42 had to make a move. That delicate balancing act they'd been doing, it just became impossible. So the company executed a hard, fast pivot toward the US. It started systematically cutting all its ties to China, selling off its investments in Chinese tech giants, agreeing to do a very expensive rip and replace of all its Chinese hardware, and finally, saying yes to that Microsoft deal. And yeah, that $1.5 billion deal, it came with some very strict conditions. Microsoft gets a seat on G40's board. The whole agreement was set up with input from the US government, and it includes a security pact that gives Washington a lot of oversight. You can think of them as American guardrails on G40's future.
So, what does this all mean for the future of technology around the world? I mean, this wasn't just about one company, right? This sent a huge signal to everybody.
This whole saga, it basically gives us a new playbook for how the US operates. It's using its absolute dominance in AI and the power of its biggest companies to force its allies to pick a side. It's a new kind of tech diplomacy, and it's backed up by the threat of being completely cut off from American innovation. Which leaves us with a pretty provocative final thought. As this rivalry between the US and China for the technologies that are going to define our future gets more and more intense, is staying neutral even an option anymore for the rest of the world? The story of G42 seems to suggest that the answer is probably no.